love you. You know that I do. Hi, are you kids? No, we were just saying how we sit in front of the second. Yeah, I know. We're trying to make you feel welcome and put at the table there. So you wouldn't have an empty table.
Well, I won't have an empty table because I know that someone will come and fill this table.
You gotta pluck them every time. We got close to that.
You met Lindsay.
I am.
Who's never talking about him.
About
Talking about the CDL
Oh,
program.
okay. I thought you were talking about how I misbehaved. So soon. Keep an eye on her.
She's talking about this wonderful program. He's like, right to meet her.
Oh. Yeah, I just read my text message, but
I'm easy to get a hold of.
Have
Yes.
you met my husband?
I just every
Yeah.
Right? So I'm going to get us started in a minute.
Welcome everyone to the Diversity Series for Supervisors. Thank you very much for coming today. It looks like we're a couple minutes late, so we're going to get started here. Shortly I'm going to be introducing the speaker to you, but first of all I'm asking Paul Williams to come up and just say a couple words.
Well, thank you. Friday afternoon, 1 o'clock till 3 o'clock, not the witching hour, it's the learning hour. My name is Paul Williams. I'm the Deputy Mayor as of January 1st of this year. I don't know that I've had a chance to meet many of you yet, but I'm slowly working my way around the departments of the city. So just want to welcome you and say thank you for taking the time on a Friday afternoon early in the summer when the sun might come out. Take time to really drill down on issues of diversity and inclusiveness. I'm excited that this whole series is happening. My work is actually, for the last 20 years, has been out in neighborhoods of St. Paul and working in community development, neighborhood revitalization, and particularly working in communities of color and doing a lot of kind of organizing and residential development, commercial development out in the neighborhoods of the city. And so to me, this is about asset building. This is not about addressing a problem. It's about building assets. It's about seeing opportunities. And as I'm getting more into the business of the city, diversity, inclusiveness is good business. Our customer base is increasingly diverse. It already has been diverse, but this is about good business. I'm kind of done talking about it as a moral issue. I'm all about talking about it as a business issue. And so from a customer perspective, in terms of where our revenues increasingly will come from in the future, in terms of who our vendors, who our suppliers are, and importantly, who potential employees are, they look and come from very different cultures. So I'm all about the business of this. The mayor is real clear that that's a priority of his. He's been very strong, as you know, in the last 5 years trying to kind of open up the practices of the city and open up the work of the city to new and different communities. So I'm thrilled that you took the time to be here today. I'm thankful to the folks in HR for putting this all together, and look forward to working and learning with you today. So thanks for being here.
And now let me introduce you to our wonderful speaker today. I'm very thankful that you are able to come and do this diversity series for us. And in case you don't know, but we are offering 4 different diversity sessions to supervisors, and you should have received the flyer. And if you've only signed up for one and you want to sign up for more, please feel free to email Brittany's family and she's happy to turn around as well. So, Andre is an energetic presenter, powerful communicator, and a dynamic teacher. His educational influences span across the North American continent. He integrates his abilities as an improv comedian, large group facilitator, keynote speaker, and classroom teacher to captivate and educate the audience. There are many words that define Andre. They are educator, student,
Improvisational.
comedian, speaker, activist, facilitator, coach, mentee, mentor, leader, team member, community organizer, diversity trainer, motivator, husband, friend, and son. The most representative, however, is Andre, the enkindled spirit. Please welcome Mr. Andre Koen, president and founder of AM Horizons. Thank you very much.
So it's very embarrassing to have all the stuff that you wrote read back to you about yourself. So thank you for sharing that embarrassment with me. What I want to tell you and what I want to share with you is that I am just a guy who learns some stuff and has a lot of questions about life. And so if you're looking for statistical data and outcome-based kinds of approaches for today, this might not be the presentation for you. The one thing that I can give you and that I want to share with you is that I have more questions, and I'd like to explore some of those questions with you around diversity and share some of the things that I learned. I now work for Anoka County as well as being a consultant. And there I am the Affirmative Action Officer, EEO, compliance person, limited English proficiency, and Americans with Disabilities Act program chair. So I have all of those hats, and I have to say that I am so excited to be here with someone, with other folks who understand what it means to work in government. A lot of times when you work, even with teachers, they don't necessarily understand the strings that we have to operate under being a part of government. So anytime that I can present and be in front of folks who work in government, I'm really excited and pleased to do so. So there's that. We'll get started. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Diversity 101, a new paradigm. When you hear the word diversity, what kinds of things come up for you? What kinds of things come up?
Inclusiveness.
Inclusiveness, okay? Yes, sir. Different languages, okay? Multicultures, okay? Other things, diversity. Social economic. Food, okay? Diversity. Age, okay? Abilities. So if I ask 100 people what diversity is, how many answers would I get? Yeah, our attorneys say 200. So 2 plus 2 equals what? 4. 2 plus 2 equals 4. 2 plus 4 equals 6. And that happens consistently over and over again, right? So if I'm a teacher and I give my students a math problem and I give them 3 plus 1, and every time my students give me the answer as 6, what can I say about myself as a teacher? I'm probably not a good teacher. There's a problem with that, right? Well, the same thing happens with diversity. How can we all have different definitions of the same word and all be right? So I want to challenge that, all right? And I think we need a new definition because those old definitions have actually lost their meaning, all right? So I'm going to offer you a new way of thinking about that stuff. So before we get to that, I want to watch a quick video, and I'll double check the volume to make sure that it's up. And then I want to have some conversations about the video. All right? So here we go. going on in this video? What's happening? The child is not getting what he wants. All right, what else is happening? He needs attention. All right?
Grandstanding.
He's grandstanding.
He's jealous of the dog.
What's that?
He's jealous of the
He's jealous of the dog. Actually, I think the dog is the funniest thing in the
Yeah.
video. You know? He's just like, oh, you guys. So,
Little
yes.
kids don't know that you exist, even if you're not right in front of them, you know, so he'll only cry when you know you're looking at him.
Okay, so he's only crying when he knows that they're looking at him. All right? So, why is the child falling on the ground, though? Why is he flopping on the ground? Drama, okay. What else? He doesn't know how else to express himself. What else? It's worked in the past. Can we make the assumption that this is probably not his first time doing this? Right? It's probably not his third time or his fourth time. And so he's doing this because in the past it worked. Which means, now we're intelligent beings. So if it worked in the past, and all the other, all things being the same or equal or mostly similar to past experiences, if it worked in the past, I can make the assumption that it will work when? Now. I can make the assumption, because it worked in the past, that it will work now. Which also means I can make one other assumption, which is what? It will work in the future. Right? So because I've had success, I've gotten what I wanted in the past, I assume that behavior will demonstrate itself to be effective presently, and so I can also make that assumption that it'll happen in the future. Now, here's a core question, particularly for supervisors, because we have employees that act like this in one way, shape, form, or another, right? When will the child stop falling on the ground? When you stop paying attention to it? Well, it looked like the parents weren't really paying attention to it, but the child kept doing it. What happens when you ignore a child who is doing that stuff? Do they get tired out? Eventually, but before they get tired out, they're going to do it how many more times? 1,000,000 more times, right? Sometimes when you ignore folks who are misbehaving, do their behaviors become exacerbated? Yeah. Because you're not giving me that attention, so I'm going to get more and more and more, right? So maybe it's not paying attention to them. When will the baby change?
He figures out it doesn't work.
When he figures out it doesn't work. Is it not working now for the baby? Not at that moment, right? So it's already not working.
But he doesn't know yet. I mean, he's not teaching it. I mean, the trial and error period maybe is something that needs to be.
The only time that the baby will change his behavior is when he realizes that it doesn't work. You have employees that you're working with, and you're like, that management style, the way you talk to people, is not working for you, or it's not working for me. But when will they change it? When they've had the epiphany that this no longer works, that I'm not getting the benefits that I want. All right? So we're gonna go down that path a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about my approach, what I've learned from my students. And it's funny, before I came to Minneapolis, St. Paul, I worked at a place called the American Youth Foundation in St. Louis, Missouri. And I worked at a goody-goody camp. Right? So this is where the International Baccalaureate students go, the honor students, all that kind of stuff. And when I worked with the goody-goody kids, I would ask them to sit down, and guess what they did? They sat down. Right? Or I would work with, I'd ask them to be quiet, and guess what they did? They were quiet, right? And so I got a job teaching at a charter school in the Midway area of St. Paul called Skills for Tomorrow. It closed last year. And so I moved from St. Louis up here. And so I don't know if you've ever met a camp counselor or been a camp counselor, but they're just a different kind of person. You know, they're really hyper and peppy and positive, and so that's the kind of person I was. And so I spent 2 weeks working on my syllabus, 2 weeks working on my bulletin board, so my room was all pretty, and the kids had their folders with their names on it and the syllabus. And the first day of class, I'm so excited. The students come in and they sit down, and I said, "All right, students, let's get ready to learn." And what do you think they did? Well, some of them tried to walk out, and others gave me the one-finger gang sign that sometimes you give people who cut you off, right? So I had to rethink about how to teach. And so these were some of the things that my students actually taught me. And I think they taught me more than I ever could have taught them. All right? So first of all, people can learn, change, and grow. As a supervisor, why is that something that I need to have as a part of my mantra? The way I think or the way I speak. That people can learn, change, and grow.
It's easy sometimes to just discount a person if they're screwing up a lot or they just don't seem that they want to be there or whatever. You have to be willing to accept that they're gonna change if you give them the right tools.
Okay? So you have to, and this is coming from HR. So you have to give people that understand that if you give them the right tools, that they'll make the right decisions. So that's one piece. What's the other piece?
What was your question? What's your question?
Yeah, my question is, as a supervisor, why is it important for me to hold for people that people can learn, change, and grow? Why is that important as a supervisor? Okay, so as you experience more stuff as a supervisor, you learn, change, and grow. Why else?
Remember that when they're not doing the things you want them to do, that it is possible that they might eventually learn what it is you want to do.
That is possible. Yes, sir.
Because if you put the wrong if that was not true, you could not have it.
You couldn't. You couldn't supervise, you couldn't manage, and your life would be so frustrating. Because, you know, there are policies and procedures before you can just fire or discharge someone, right? And so not understanding that can really make your life kind of miserable. And the great thing about the human being and the human spirit is that we can surprise even ourselves, right? I had a student that, and I'm not proud to say this, but I'll be honest and transparent, I thought she was garbage. I thought she was a garbage kid, a throwaway kid, someone who didn't have anything to offer. And so I treated her that way. What do you think the result? What kind of results did I get?
More garbage.
I got more garbage. So she justified and solidified everything that I thought about her because I had the expectation that she would, and so therefore she fulfilled the expectation. Years later, I'm on Facebook and I get this instant message. Guess who it is? It's her. She's writing me and she's thanking me for being a good teacher. She's saying, I thought about some of the things that you talked about and all this kind of stuff. And I'm saying to myself, I started actually weeping because I had said to myself, this is a throwaway kid. But there was something that I said to her that she latched on to, and I surprised myself, and she surprised me by how well she's doing in life now. And so if we don't hold that out for people, we're damning them to a fate that they don't necessarily have to have. All right. Secondly, all behaviors are goal-directed, which means that everything that we do is pointed towards helping us to achieve or reach some kind of goal. All right. People do what makes sense to them, even if it doesn't make sense to who? Anybody else, right? So even though it doesn't make sense to me, they're doing it because they think it makes sense to them. And lastly, attitude is a response to a goal. Typically, what have we been taught about an attitude? What is an attitude? How you feel about something? Your outlook. All right. What else? How you portray yourself.
Something you can control.
Something you can control. And typically, what I was taught was that, an attitude is a response to external stimuli, right? That's what I was taught, that attitude was. But I want to offer you something different to think about in terms of an attitude. So my dad was a pastor, and on Sunday we went to church from 7:30 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. We'd stop at 3 o'clock for chicken, not because we were black, but because chicken is delicious. So Sunday, all day, church. Friday night, I asked my dad for the car, and what does my dad say because he loves me? He says, yes, he loves me. Right? So he gives me the keys, I go out, I have fun, I put gas in the car, I bring it back. I say my dad has what kind of an attitude? A good or a positive attitude. Sunday, well, what does my dad say about my attitude? What does he say about my attitude? Friday night, I got the car. Yeah, I got a good attitude. So my dad has a good attitude, I have a good attitude. So Sunday comes. My best friend calls me at noon and says, Andre, can you pick me up and go to the movies? What do I know about Sunday? Church. All day. Right? But I'm feeling gutsy. So, I'm like, I can gamble on Jesus. Come on, Jesus, come on. So I go up to my dad and I say, Dad, can I borrow the car? And what does my dad say? He says no. And not only does he say no, he gives me this lecture. And he talks about, how I'm leading people to hell. Because at our house, every negative consequence was leading you to hell. If you didn't do the dishes or clean your room, you're going to hell. Right? So he gives me all of this stuff. And so I say my dad has what kind of an attitude? A bad or negative attitude. Consequently, what does he say about my attitude? That I have a bad or negative attitude. So what is it that actually determines if one has a good or a bad attitude? The goal. Anybody been around teenagers? Anybody been a teenager? Teenagers are said to have lots of attitude, right? When teenagers don't get what they want, they have what we call, where I come from, a funky attitude, right? I mean, just bad, you don't even want to be around them, right? But when teenagers get what they want, it's like they purr, because they're so excited to get what they want. And they want to cuddle with you and all this kind of stuff. And they even get saliva that kind of drips out the side of their, that's my cat. But what determines an attitude? Whether you get what you want or not. All right? So at the basis of an attitude is your goal. When you accomplish your goal, you will have a good attitude. When you don't accomplish your goal, you will have a bad attitude. So when you encounter an employee or a person in the community who has a bad attitude, what's the one thing that you know for sure about them? They're not reaching their goal. And so part of your job is one of two things. It's to help them reach their goal, or what? Help them adjust what their goal is. All right? So as a supervisor, when you see that attitude, you understand that that's a response to a goal. All right. So this is my life in a snapshot, and this is me as a little baby. Wasn't that cute? And then this is our Easter photo, and that's me, and that's my brother and my sister. And these are my grandparents, my two uncles, and that's my dad in the middle. And this is my family in our Cosby years. If you look close, you can see Theo and Vanessa and all that kind of stuff. And then, I love Facebook and I hate Facebook all at the same time. I love Facebook because you can connect with folks and share photos and that kind of stuff. And I hate Facebook because there are people who keep blowing my image. So, now I eat organic. I have worm composting in my kitchen. I do yoga, and I do some manscaping from time to time. Right? But people keep putting pictures from my past that are blowing my image. All right? And so this is a picture of my friend Samisha, and she's holding an Uzi in her hand. And then this is Sharon, and then this is me with a double-barrel sawed-off shotgun held to Sharon's head. Now, I know that seems like a scary picture, but context is everything, all right? So I will tell you that we were at a concert, a musical concert, and I don't know if you know what the band plays, and it really doesn't matter because the name of the band will give you the atmosphere from which we were kind of operating. And the name of the band was Public Enemy. All right? So we're at the Public Enemy concert. I am my father's son. In 1968, what was happening in the world that could be a major significance in 1968? The Civil Rights Movement. What else? Vietnam. What else was happening in 68? Social unrest. All right? I forgot to tell you. I'm African American. I didn't want anyone to be surprised. All right? So, as a son of African American parents, what one event could have had a profound impact on my parents in 1968? The assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. That same year, my parents turned 18. They graduated from high school and were on their way to college. And my father goes to my grandfather and says, I want to do something about the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And my grandfather says, great, do it someplace else. So my father goes off to college and he joins this group called the Black Panthers. Now, I don't know what you know about Black Panthers or what you think you know about Black Panthers, but primarily they were a political party. And their objective was to raise black people out of poverty. All right? And so one of the remnants of the Panther Party movement is something that we now call the Federal School Lunch Program. The federal government said, we love the program, but we hate you Panthers. So we'll take your program. And so in 1968, he became a Panther. In 1970, the most amazing, incredible, beautiful thing that could ever happen to my father happened.
You were born.
I was born. And at that point, he realizes that the revolution is no place for a family. There's no health care in the revolution, and the retirement plan for revolutionaries sucks. So he cuts his afro, he gets an L7 square job, shout out to Rick James, and so he starts working at a bank. While at that bank, he gets a call from God. Now what happens when you get a call from God? You answer, right? I was in a workshop once and somebody said, you run. Right. So he gets a call from God, and God calls my father to be a Pentecostal, fire and brimstone, Bible-thumping preacher. Hallelujah, yeah! I am my father's son. So in my presentation, it might get a little bit political. That's not my fault. And then I was in one workshop and someone said, well, sir, it sounds like you have a political agenda. And I said, as a matter of fact, I do have a political agenda. It's called the Constitution of the United States. And I will do my part to make sure that I live up to it and that I hold every one of us to that same high standard. And also, it might seem like I'm preaching to the choir, but in the words of my father, the choir needs preaching too. All right? So what I'd like for you to do right now is I'd like for you to take out a piece of paper. And I want you to draw 5 circles on that piece of paper that are large enough to put information inside of. All right? So 5 circles. Circles that are large enough to put information inside of. All right. What I'd like to first talk about, anyone been to a diversity training before? Please raise your hand. Okay, I have a lot of people to heal. There's a couple of things about diversity training that I personally despise. Typically, I don't like the trainers themselves because they typically come into a training like they have all their stuff together and that I'm just a peon and I don't get it. The other reason I typically don't like diversity trainings is typically because someone has messed up. And now we all have to go to this training, right? And they typically don't know that it's them. You know? The other reason that I typically don't like diversity trainings is because typically a supervisor or manager goes to a conference, they hear the speaker, and then they get what my father would call saved. They see the light. And so now they're proselytizing this new conversion on the rest of us. And so what I would like to offer is that in our time together today, that we not think of this as a diversity training, but more about a conversation, about exploring some questions. All right? So first of all, I want to peel apart this notion of diversity and talk about what diversity is not. All right? So first of all, diversity is not political correctness. What is political correctness?
Using the right word.
Using the right words. All right? What else is political correctness?
Not offending someone.
Not offending someone. Political correctness.
Peer pressure.
Okay, so it's like peer pressure. All right? And I have to say it, but political correctness is a joke. It really is a joke. I mean, we did a good job in the 90s of trying to pause people before they said dumb stuff. But now it's gone way overboard. And, because a janitor is no longer a janitor, what are they called now? A custodial engineer. Okay? Political correctness, because I was in a training once, and a woman stood up and she said, Andre, I want to know why all the colored people are moving into my neighborhood. How do you think the audience responded when she said that? Yeah, right? They were like, ugh. And why'd they go, ugh? She said colored, and you're not supposed to say colored, right? But when that woman stood up, I looked at her, and one of the things that I noticed was that it was clear she did not have a lot of stamps in her passport. Right? It was clear that she didn't go to the Ivy League schools of the Midwest. And so what was my responsibility to her? She asked me a question. What was my responsibility? To answer her question. We can get to all the political correct stuff later, but she was brave enough to stand up and ask a question that other people had that they wouldn't ask. And I've also been in conversations with folks who have had the right words, but as they're speaking, your skin just crawls. Because you can hear the nastiness in their tone, right? So it's not about political correctness. It's also not about black and white. A lot of times, people ask me, why do we always have to talk about black and white issues? Why do those things always come up? And it's twofold. One, there's the metaphorical black and white. And then there's also the racial construct of black and white. And what I would say is that you do not get to trigonometry until you've passed algebra. There are still lessons that we need to learn in this black and white relationship, whether you're thinking the racial construct or the metaphorical black and white. There's still things that we can learn that we can add and apply to other areas. All right? Also, diversity is not about blame, fault, and guilt. You do not have to drink the Kool-Aid. You don't have to believe what I believe. You don't have to feel bad about yourself or about other folks. Diversity is not about therapy. It's also, a lot of times trainers want to see how much they can evoke emotions from folks. I've been in trainings where it was clear that the trainer would not be satisfied until somebody cried. That's not my job. That's not my job. Diversity is also not about meritocracy. And meritocracy is basically the concept that if you work hard enough, you can be just like me. What's the problem with that concept of meritocracy, that you can work your way up to be acceptable or to be like me? What's that? It doesn't exist? What else is problematic about that? They establishes you as less than, but who says that you want to be like me? Who am I? Right? How do I become the standard? And it's funny, it would be such a shame for LeBron James to have to play basketball the way way I do. So it's not about meritocracy. And lastly, and this is the part where I typically lose some of my diversity friends because they're like, don't touch this, don't talk about this. But diversity is not about tolerance. What does tolerance mean? To put up with. All right? So my brother-in-law came over for a visit with my sister and her kids, and I tolerated that dude. Why? I knew when he was leaving. Tolerance means to put up with something until you no longer have to. Are our communities getting less diverse? Are our human relations getting less complicated? And my answer would be no. And I hear some of you, I hear the thought bubbles above your heads because you've been to other trainings and you've done your own research and you've heard people talk about the fact that political correctness and meritocracy and tolerance are good things. And I can't disagree with that. But what I will say to you is that babies drink milk. Why do babies drink milk? It's what they're fed. They grow healthy. What else? They thrive. They can't choose for themselves. What else? It's fundamental to their growth because it's the simplest nutrient that they can take in. But at some point, babies move from milk to tofu. I'm a part-time vegetarian. I guess that makes me an omnivore. So those are the things that diversity is not. What I'd like for you to do, in those 5 circles, I'd like for you to put one thing that you value in each one of those circles. One thing that you value, out of all the things that you value, place one in each one of those circles that you've written on your paper. One thing that you value. Just in general. So it could be a concept like freedom. It could be a person. It could be an object like my summer home. One thing that you value in each one of those circles. We're gonna play a game really quickly, and what I'd like for you to do is I want you to find 2 people who either agree with or share one of the things that you have on your paper. All right. One person can't sign your paper more than twice. All right. So you want to find 2 people for each one of those circles, and one person can't sign your paper more than twice. All right. And I think we'll do about a minute starting now.
Somebody up here must be like-minded.
people for each one of those circles? You guys get 10 folks? No? Oh, okay. No, not for each one? Okay. As you were going around the room, were there folks, or were there things that you saw in other folks' papers that you were like, oh man, I didn't think about that, I should have. What were some of those things?
Help.
Health? Okay.
iPod.
Peace?
iPad.
iPad, okay. Cool.
Somebody has themselves, value themselves.
You thought that was good, someone valued themselves, okay? Cool. Was there one thing that you were pretty sure you would find somebody to sign, but you actually weren't able to find somebody to sign?
Yeah.
What was one of those
Home.
things? Home.
My home.
Okay. Please raise your hand if you value your home, even if it wasn't written on your paper.
I spend a lot of money on it.
Spend a lot of money on it. All right. Cool.
Security blanket.
So why do you think I would do an activity like this? I don't know why the stuff is doing that, but
Do you need the microphone?
I don't think I need the microphone, do I?
No.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Someone's iPod.
Somebody's iPod.
I think you're good.
All right, good. All right. So why do you think I would do an activity like that at this point in our presentation? So we can stand up.
Surely we're all different, we all value something uniquely different.
Okay, so we all value something uniquely different.
Yeah.
We all
We're very much the same.
And that we're very much the same, right? We have so much more in common. And it's so funny, a lot of times in diversity conversations, we spend so much time talking about how we're different that we don't spend enough time talking about the things that we have in common, the things that actually make us more similar, all right? So I just spent some time talking about what diversity is not. What I'd like to give you is to start some conversation about what diversity actually is. And that diversity is the fact that there is dignity and honor in being human. What is dignity? What's dignity? It's pride and self-worth. Dignity. What's that? Dignity. Is dignity something that you have or something that you can give to someone? It is in fact both. Right? It is in fact both. Now the interesting thing about dignity is if you don't give people dignity, they'll try and take it. And I've learned this driving through the cities. Because I don't know why I would make this assumption. Anytime I would see a group of teenagers, I would think that they'd be able to move across the street a little faster than they do. Right? It just, and I used to think it was because their pants were hanging too low. But I've seen them pull those suckers up and get moving. All right? But one of the things that I started noticing was, and I don't know if this has happened to you, but I'm either at a light or a stop sign, there's a group of teenagers, and they're walking across the street, and they like make eye contact with me as they're walking like super slow. What they don't realize with me is that I have really good car insurance. But what are they doing? What they're trying to say is, you as adults don't see me any other time, but you will give me some dignity and honor and respect right now. And so we give dignity. What is honor? What is honor? Okay, recognition of value in someone.
Validation of someone's being.
Okay.
I don't think it's attached to any act in particular.
Okay. It's a validation of someone's being. It's not necessarily attached to any particular act. Honor.
Respect.
It's respect. Okay? Cool. Senator Obama. Senator Obama. Senator Obama is in downtown Chicago. I see Senator Obama. I affectionately call him OB. So I'm like, what's up, OB? And he's, hello, Andre. So I go meet Senator Obama, and I give him, you know, the handshake that he likes to have with the exploding fingers at the end, you know, right? So I just gave Senator Obama respect. Senator Obama now becomes the highest office in the land, President Obama. So now how do I greet now President Obama?
Yeah.
I don't. But if I try to, I walk up to you know, President Obama, and it might look like this. Hey! Right? The Secret Service will be all over me, unless I was in Florida, but that's a whole other conversation, right? So what is honor? Honor is respect at a high level. Who have we said that we will give high respect to in our society? Seniors. We'll give high respect to seniors. Who else?
Parents.
Parents. All right. Who else?
Military.
Military. Men and women who've served and fought in wars that I was too chicken to do. Right? To our police and fire, we said that we will give them the highest levels of respect. So that's honor. Please raise your hand if you can answer yes to any of these two questions. Raise your hand if you either took a test or purchased a ticket that made you eligible to be born on this planet. None of us have done anything to bring ourselves here. And we're all trying to figure out what our purpose is, what it means to be here. All right? We all accepted an invitation. I don't like to think about how that invitation came. That's disgusting. But we all accepted an invitation to be here. And one of the things I was really excited about when I figured out this thing about diversity was that I looked the word human, I looked that up in the dictionary, and I found that it has two meanings. One is the noun, Homo sapiens sapien, the one who knows that they exist. Being a biped, having a big brain, opposable thumbs, and a belly button. If you ever encounter a person without a belly button, be concerned. All right? So human, the noun. But human is also what? An adjective. And what do adjectives do? They describe, right? So, and I have to say this in case there are any animal rights activists or anything like that. This next part of my presentation, I am not saying that animals do not have feelings. I'm not saying that animals don't have emotions. I'm not saying that they don't have sentience. But what I am saying is that there are things that I expect from human beings that if my dog did it, I would be surprised. So what are some of those things that we would expect from human beings? That we teach our children about what it means to be human? That if our dog or cat did, we might be a little bit surprised. To share. What else?
Hug.
To hug. What else? To show respect towards others. Same thing? All right. What else? Don't take what's not yours. Be kind. Do unto others. Just work hard. Now, the real interesting thing is, when it comes to being human, there are things that we can do. But as human beings, we have said that there are some things that we won't do. Even though we can, we won't do those things. All right? So, dignity and honor of being human is what I like to think about as the new definition of diversity. And I have to tell you, it's changed the way I live my life when I came to this understanding. Because when people cut me off in the road, I have to say, there's dignity and honor of being human. They're doing the best they can to do their thing, and I'm going to let them have their space. Because before, I was really uptight. Right? Because, I don't know about you, but I have this passive-aggressive relationship with those people who ride the merge lane. Now, they saw the sign just like I did, and I got over it. But but it changed the way I live. When I realized that there's dignity and honor in being human, and that people are doing the best that they can, because even if it doesn't make sense to me, it makes sense to them. what I'd like for you to do on the back of that paper where we make the 5 circles is I want you to make a circle as large as you can on that piece of paper. As large as you possibly can on that piece of paper. It can even be a rhombus. I see some people having challenges with circles. This is the circle of all human knowledge! Okay, that's a little much. Let's say that this is a pie of all human knowledge. What I want you to do is I want you to cut yourself a piece of pie relative to the size of what you know of everything that there is to know. I want you to cut yourself a piece of pie of what you know relative to everything that there is to know. All science, all languages, all
Label
history.
this as humble pie.
Yeah, this is a very humble pie.
It's called humble pie.
All right. So what kinds of things do you find in that slice of pie? Things that you know. What are some things that you know for sure? What's that? Okay, your slice of mistakes. Okay. What are some things that you know for sure?
The sun's gonna rise.
The sun is going to rise tomorrow. All right. What else? There will always be change, some kind of change. What else? One more thing. There will be some road construction on the way home.
80%
All right?
of the English language.
What's that?
80% of the English language.
Yes, 80% of the English language you
Some of
know.
it.
All right. So there are things that you know. What I'd like you to do, we're going to cut this pie into 3 pieces. So I want you to think about this second piece, and we'll talk about the third piece in just a second. The second piece of pie is I want you to cut yourself a piece of pie relative to the size of what you know that you do not know. That you are aware of that you do not know. For example, I know that I do not know Mandarin Chinese. I know that I don't know that. I know that I don't know how to fly a helicopter. I know that I don't know that. So cut that second piece of pie. Yep. So now the second piece of pie is the size of what you know you do not know. What you are aware of that you do not know. So what are some examples of things that you are aware of that you do not know?
All the books in the library shelf that you haven't even explored. They're
Okay.
there, but you know you haven't read them.
Okay.
You don't know what they
So
are.
books in the library that you haven't read.
All the libraries.
All the library.
Most of the libraries.
Most of the library.
In the world.
In the world. Okay. What else? What is something else that you know you don't know?
The majority of the people in the world.
The majority of the people in the world. You don't know their names. You don't know where they live and all that kind of stuff. Yes, ma'am. Particle physics. You know. Please raise your hand if you know you don't know particle physics. There's some smart people in here. Okay. So there's what we know. There's what we know we don't know. And what do you think the last part is? Obviously what?
You don't know what you don't know.
What you don't know, you don't know. Which is what? You don't know, right? We'll also call that a blind spot. So if you can label that part of your pie a blind spot. And we'll come back to that blind spot in just a little bit. So where did you get this pie that you have? How did you come to this pie? What's that? You were born, okay. Random line placement, okay. Experience. All right. Where's the fundamental place where you get your view about the world? Where was that place? Your family, your home, right? And where did your family get their concepts about the world?
Family and culture.
From family and culture. And where did your great-grandparents get their ideas and concepts about the world?
From the white man.
From the white man. Caught me off guard. issue or problem that your pie presents? It's a huge blind spot, right? And unawareingly, the interesting thing is that we pass that blind spot on to other folks. We give this pie to other folks from our experience the same way it's been handed down to us. And so what I want us to think about is how do we expose that blind spot so we get more of our pie back? All right? So we can keep going. Mindset matters. So I'm going to show this video, and then I'm going to have some conversations about the importance of mindset. different folks, they will do more poorly or other folks.
I'd be interested to know if you think how many after school things you can have in here, it's a little bit tough on the kids after all this state exams.
That would be interesting. I would imagine there probably are in some ways. What are some other things that
It's very powerful for us, for the supervisors, that we have this power that we can,
No, I think it's interesting too about all the labels that we now have for different disorders and whatever else you want to call them. You know, attention type thing. The kids know if they have them. That's it, I can't do this because I know I have this. And that affects their whole life. Which you don't always consider.
How many people, you know, if you were growing up now, would be diagnosed with something? Based on what you know about yourself, you'd be diagnosed with something, yeah. And the interesting thing is that, particularly when we work with kids, is that they take those labels as now having some kind of excuse as to why I can't perform. Because I should be performing, because I'm an American, and that's just what we do. We're the best at everything. And so because I'm not, it's obvious I have some kind of deficit. I have a label that keeps me back, right? One of the things I also think about when I see this is I grew up in the 80s, and I remember sitting down talking to my grandfather about his father. And my great grandfather grew up in the South, in Tennessee, and he was a gambler. And he earned the nickname Doc, D-O-C, Doc. And why do you think they called my great-grandfather, who was a gambler, why do you think they called him Doc? Because he was a Doc Holliday, he was a doctor with the cards, and doctors are said to be what? Smart, good. I mean, that's in his community, the best thing you could be was a doctor. And so then I think about, my generation growing up, and we would call everything pimp. Like, dude, that was so pimp. Oh, you pimp that out. Anybody ever hear that in the 80s and 90s? Yeah, so that was the thing. But why were we calling each other pimp? Why was it pimp? Why do you think it was pimp in my community? It was cool, highly respected, person with power and money, because all the doctors and lawyers had moved out to the suburbs. So the best thing in my community to be is a pimp. And now I listen to the young people talk today, and folks who are engaged in gangs, and folks who are faking it, and folks who are just trying to survive. And I hear kids talk to each other in some ways that really disturb me based on this kind of stuff. And I hear them refer to themselves as beasts. Why would that alarm me? That I hear our kids relating that oh man, I'm a beast at that. Or oh dude, you are a beast. Why does that disturb me? It's how they get the most respect. What else?
Isn't just different words like when people say, hey, that's bad. And it's, of course, they're just saying that because it's the exact opposite of what it used to mean. So they say beast, but they don't mean beast, because they mean expert.
Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to do an experiment. I want you to close your eyes. Just close your eyes real quick. Just close your eyes. Don't go to sleep, though. I'm going to say a word. And the word is apple. Open your eyes. When I said the word apple, what came up for you? Red. Green. Computer. Always one. Did anyone have an apple with a shiny spot on it? Okay. Did anybody have an apple with speckles? Okay. Anybody have apple with a stem? Anyone have an apple with a leaf? Yeah, the whole tree. All right. How did that happen? You me in my human relations with other folks, particularly as a manager, when I understood this principle, that human beings, our number one way that we communicate is telepathically. My job is to get my idea out of my head and into your head. That's how I communicate. And so we use very specific words to communicate that thought. So I'm trying to get the thoughts out of my head and get them into your head. Right? Now, had I said rotten apple, would you have gotten the same image? Why? Because there's a differentiation between an apple and a rotten apple. So, what's that? There's also a connotation associated with that. So when we talk about kids referring to themselves as beasts, it could be easy for us to go to that place where that's just kids being kids. But if we understand the cognitive ways in which we operate in the world, we might be alarmed by that. Or we should give some consideration to what else it could mean. Because if I have an image of a beast, or I imagine myself as being a beast, how will I behave? Like a beast. And what do beasts do? Whatever they want to do. You know, when you're wrestling a 500-pound gorilla, when do you stop? When he's done. Right? And the same thing can be applied to our subordinates. How do they talk about each other? Do we let those little zingers fly, or do we address them as they come up? Do we support those jokes that aren't designed to build people up, but actually tear them down? Our mindset is extremely important. The way we think stimulates the way that we behave. All right? Going back to the dignity, honor, and being human. Can you imagine what your life would be like if everyone around you gave you the dignity and honor that you deserve, not because you did anything, but because you were? I put a card on your table that deals with respect. I want to talk just a little bit about this concept of respect. And what do you notice in the picture? The kid is eating healthier. All right. The dad has a wife. You can beat a wife in anything. No, that was a bad joke. Very bad. All right. It's clear that there's a power differential here, right? And what is power? What's power?
Quantity in here, quantity of food in the place.
Okay, so on the picture, it's about quantity and type of food. What is power? Control, the ability to control. All right? 8th grade science. I learned that power is the ability to do work. All right? Power is the ability to do work. When you have access to that ability to do work, you're able to do amazing things. All right. So let's just talk about the 5 reasons that we don't get respect, particularly as supervisors. One of the things that happens is that we say, "Do as I say, not as I do." And why is that? Why do folks typically not like that? When people said that to you, why have you not liked folks who said, "Do as I say, not as I do"? What's that? It seems unfair. What else? It seems hypocritical. There's a different standard, right? Typically, we don't give enough information when we say, "Do as I say, not as I do." And people more than likely will comply to what we want them to do if we give them enough information. All right? We'll come back to number 2. Number 3, another reason we don't get respect is that we say, boys will be boys, or that's just how things are. You have to understand that about that person on the council or that particular supervisor, as opposed to challenging that and having people really have a discussion about why has it always been that way. All right? 4th is that people will say, "That's not my child," or "That's not my responsibility, so somebody will take care of it." What do we know about that kind of thinking? Nobody takes care of it. You know, a lot of times, particularly when we deal with crimes, the crimes don't get people don't report the crime because they assume that somebody else will. And ultimately what happens is nobody does. All right? And then number 5, disrespect is a form of violence. Disrespect is violence. What is the outcome or the affect of violence? What happens as a result of violence? Somebody gets hurt. What else happens?
Honor, value.
Someone's
depleted.
okay. So someone's
Violated.
honor or value is depleted or reduced. What else? Chaos. All right. Fear. What does disrespect do? A number of the same things. All right. And lastly, I'm going to go back to number 2. And it was funny in that those early years of teaching high school, I always had one student who would always come up and say, "You got to earn my respect." Has anyone ever heard that? You have to earn someone's respect. Yeah. What I would offer you is that the same thing I offered the student. I asked the student who came with that attitude towards me. I said, "Okay, give me the checklist. When is the final exam? How do I know that I have done enough to earn your respect?" And guess what their answer was? The kids kill me when they're unsure. They start mumbling. Right? Respect can never be earned. Now, I know this is a sticky point. People go, "What?" To get respect, you must give it. And, now here's the trick. Here's the real tricky part. Respect's not respect until you give it to somebody who's disrespecting you. When you give respect to somebody who's respectful to you, is that a lot of exercise? Are you flexing your muscles a whole lot? Mm-mm. But when someone is being disrespectful to you, and you're being respectful to them in spite of how they're acting, what does that say about you? What do other people see in that interaction? What do they see? They see you as the better person. What's that? They see you as confident. They see you as someone who is taking the high road. Now, there are some people who might say, "You're being a doormat. Why are you letting them walk all over you?" Has anyone ever heard somebody say that or that train of thought? That's probably the most narcissistic thing I've ever heard in my life. Because that implies that it's all about who? You. When people are being a doormat, what they're saying is, whatever's happening is happening to me. It's all about me. Why me? But what I would encourage you is that there's a difference between being a doormat and being a bridge. And what do you do on bridges? You walk all over them. Right? You walk all over bridges. But what's the difference between a doormat and a bridge? A bridge has a purpose. And when we lose our purpose, that's when it becomes about us. What's the number one job of a police officer? Serve deterrence, serve and protect? No, it's to go home. That's the number one job. And for all of us, it's my number one job. Now, when I get pulled over by a police officer, because I know that his number one job is to go home, what do you think my number one job is at that point? I want to go home too! Right? One of the things we often have to remember is that a lot of times, particularly as supervisors, if we want to help people move in a direction that is beneficial to the organization, sometimes it may look like we are doormats, when in fact we are bridges. And sometimes we get that confused and we really think it's about us, and that's when we become the doormat. But when you remember that everything that you're doing is for a purpose, that you're helping guide someone, that your behaviors are directing towards an end, and a defined end, then it doesn't become so personal and it's not about me. All right? So just some things to think about. Any questions, comments, observations so far? So, what I'd like to do is do another activity. So if you can take some of these and pass it to the table behind you. So these cards are a little they'll take a little bit of tenacity. I also have permanent markers if anyone's interested in using those for this exercise. What I'd like to do is on the back side of the card, I want you to place a plus where you've learned something positive about a group of people, a minus where you've learned something negative about a group of people, and place a 0 where you've learned nothing about a group of people. The size of your plus and the size of your minus is a measure of how much you've learned. All right? So on the back side is the categories across the top are groups of people, and then the categories along the sides are people who taught you something about those folks. Whether you learned it or not, what was it that they were trying to express to you about them? Was it a positive, was it a negative, or was it a 0? So for example, my friends, what did my friends teach me about disabled Americans? That would be a 0. We never really talked about it. What did my parents and family teach me about Asian Americans? That would be a 0 because we never really talked about it. When I think about TV, movies, and media, and Latinos, I got a lot of negatives about Latinos from TV, movies, and videos. All right? So I have permanent markers if anyone's interested. Any time frame. Going up, currently,
You have 2 answers for one.
yes, I'm sorry, and you can't have pluses and minuses in the same box, in the same area, but the size of your plus or the size of your minus will determine how much you learn. So you can have pluses and minuses in the same box. All right, I'd like you to stop. What I'd like you to do is to have a conversation at your table about some of the things that you marked or didn't mark on your card. All right, so we'll give just a couple of minutes for you to talk to your table.
categories, so, it was some pretty, pretty positive campaign that I really especially when you have family reunions for your family. So, so I think that most of that was pretty positive. You know, growing up in terms of friends, we didn't talk about a lot of these types of things. You know, I mean, on occasion, but just wasn't a big topic of our conversation. But I think that within school and in the workplace, you know, the concept of history is given kind of got, we get kind of both sides of the coin.
All right. So, what were some of the themes or highlights that you talked about in your group? What were some of the themes or things that came out as you were talking in your group?
For some people, you just didn't interact with.
Some people you just did not interact with. All right? Because of geographics or just because that was the social norm?
Social norm.
It was a social norm not to interact with
Geographic
certain-
too.
What's that?
They were geographic too.
Okay, so it's also geographic. Okay.
And when I think about that, I'm thinking about Asian Americans weren't physically where I was.
Okay, so Asian Americans weren't physically where you were. All right. Did other folks have that same kind of thing growing up, that there just weren't people that were different from you where you were? Okay. Other things, other themes or things that came out as you're talking in your group. Okay. Okay, so the children's programs are pretty good, but TV in general was not positive. Anyone else have that as a theme on there? Okay, TV and movies. Okay. Other stuff.
I think we talked about school and workplace being the places how we learn the most about the broad spectrum of people of every age.
Okay.
Because in our family, our friends, those are children in closed groups and feel in a broader sense.
Okay. So school and workplace were those places where you really get to know about a broader world and how you can relate. I have a quick question. Are there any white people in here? Please raise your hand if you are a white person. Okay. All right. What were some of the things that white people were taught about themselves? What's that? Stay out of the sun. Okay. What else?
Talking about the dominant culture, I think that most of us, if we're old enough, probably remember all the Europeans had ships. They went out to the world, they came over, they had power and colony. I think that was part of the core curriculum at one time.
Okay.
European stuff is
The reason I asked that question for a very specific reason, and I may make people upset in this next piece, but I don't care because I already got the contract signed. Who has been hurt the most by racism?
in the United States.
The United States. I'm offering you a different kind of way of looking at the world, a different kind of paradigm. And this comes from my personal experience. I haven't read it in a book. I haven't been able to Google this. But this is from my personal experience in dealing with the kids that I used to deal with in Frogtown. Because we do some sessions in Frogtown, in the Midway area of St. Paul, and I ask these questions, and we have all these race discussions and all this kind of stuff. And I say, what do you like about being your race? And all the African American kids can pop off stuff. All the Asian kids can pop off stuff. All the Latino kids can pop off stuff. And I ask white kids, and they go, I'm American. And I go, that's cute because we're all American. So what's up? And so one of the things that I started noticing was that when it came to having these kinds of conversations, there were a lot of people who, when it got to thinking about what it meant to be European American or white American, hadn't even thought about the question. And then they couldn't come up with stuff that they liked about being themselves. And I personally think that that's a problem. Now, I am a proponent that white pride is a good thing. But I'm not talking about that crazy twisted stuff that other people, they wear the white suits and all that kind of stuff. I'm not talking about that stuff. But why, as an educator, did I find it disturbing that the majority of my classes could not say or find good things about their culture to say?
But white is not a culture. I wonder if you ask what you like about, your culture, then, because white people, I don't think of myself as just a white person. I'm Irish, I'm Swedish, I'm not a white person. So when you say who's a white person, to me, that's not how I identify myself.
Okay, how many people?
So you're asking,
okay.
when you say who's a white person, that's, look at my skin, clearly I'm white, but that's not who I am. I am not a white person.
And I get that. Anybody else, can you point out her Swedishness? You could probably get the Irish already, right? So yeah, I'm not denying you access to that. I'm not saying that you don't have access to that. But when you fill out an HR form, does it ask about your Irishness?
No, I'm just saying, if you ask me the question about being white, because I don't identify with being white, I'm not going to have an answer to the question.
Okay. And I will say the fact that you are Irish is very interesting and unique because there was I think the Irish feel that a lot. They feel that a lot, and so do the Italians. They feel that a lot because there was a time when Irish weren't white. There was a time when the Italians weren't white, and so we can talk about that. But does whiteness exist? Come on now.
Okay, you know what, the interesting about what you said though, is that I didn't know until 4 years ago, when my family came over, so I didn't really know my ethnicity. So, basically.
Something to think about. What was that, sir?
How was that? You adopted and you didn't know it, or you?
No, we all came over to the United States of America at some point in time. Some people can point back 2 years, some people can point back, how many different generations, and they still have people within their family that speak their native languages. I didn't know. Turns out we came back in the 1600s. But I didn't know.
How many people's grandparents changed their name to be American? Or had them changed to be American, right? How many people have their grandparents refused to speak their native language or to teach it to other folks because that wasn't American? Has that ever happened? Okay. Yeah. So, and the only reason that I bring up the whiteness in regards to being hurt by racism is because typically that's a part of the equation that's never talked about. We never talk about the harm that was also done to white people as part of this racial construct. And I can't deny that there are benefits and all that kind of stuff, but when it comes down to it, most of us So I particularly like this exercise because those things that you learn from other folks are not your fault, but they are your what? Responsibility, right? When we go back to that big circle that you drew and there's that blind spot, right? You've all driven in cars. Typically, where are the blind spots in cars? They're, okay, right, on both sides. Where else? Behind you, all right? Sometimes on those pillars. And if you are driving a Hummer, the whole thing is a blind spot, right? But those blind spots are not your fault. They are your, however, what? They're your responsibility. And there are two ways to find out about your blind spots. And what are those two ways? You can back into something and have an accident, or you can look, right? And so what I'd like you to do is, part of your homework is to look at that chart and say, where are some ways and some places that maybe I can shore up my diversity stuff, or where have I learned some stuff that I might want to relearn or unlearn, all right? So, I got 15 minutes, so I got to make this quick. So I want to show another video clip from an ABC news report. What would you do? It's an ethical dilemma show that is currently on. Many of you have seen this episode, so please bear with me as we go through it.
Hello, and welcome to the opening show of our primetime series, What Would You Do? If you see something and you think it's wrong, do you step in or do you step away? What people say and what they do aren't always the same. That's why our hidden cameras are so revealing. In our first scenario, we weren't sure what to expect when our opinionated man behind the counter meets the Muslim woman in a headscarf. Deep in the heart of Texas, at this little roadside bakery, bigotry is being served with a coffee and beans.
No, ma'am. We don't serve Muslims here.
I'm sorry?
This is America. We're at war with your people.
I don't know what you think I am. I'm just trying to get an apple.
Well, you're a terrorist, is what you are. So,
Excuse me?
you gotta take your business elsewhere. We don't serve your kind here.
The other customers at this bakery near Waco seem to hear everything, but they barely look at the Muslim woman, even when the language is tough to take.
Get back on the camel and go back wherever you came from.
Sir, I'm an American. I was born and raised
No,
in
you're
this
not.
country.
Americans don't wear towels on their head.
Muslim Americans say these are words they hear all the time in all parts of the country. But here at the bakery, what the customers don't know is that this Muslim woman and the man behind the counter are actors. The bakery is working with us, all part of a primetime hidden camera experiment on prejudice and patriotism.
Please take your business elsewhere. Am I asking too much?
When no one even tries to help her, she makes a direct appeal.
Sir, would you mind ordering me an apple strudel? That's why I'm here. I can give you the money. I have no problem.
Please no, sir. I'm not gonna let you go.
But when he gives her the cold shoulder, she finally just leaves. You could have helped her out. You could have spoken up. Why not? We speak up for her. Well, if they were trying to do some harm to her or something, then I'll look out. But why not try to set him straight? I really think that a person that owns his own business should be able to say that. So take it.
She's not American.
Others seem to agree with our actor as to who's an American and who's not. Is it all based on the way we look?
I'm an American citizen. I just would like an apple strudel, please.
Well, I'm sorry. Then why don't you dress like an American? You're
This
so
is for
American.
religious purposes, sir. I don't think you have any rights.
So I'm religious. I don't wear, Halloween costumes around. I mean, am I wrong here, sir?
Not me.
I run my business the way I want to run.
Right. No, I'm in here with that.
This customer is adamant that the man behind the counter is doing the right thing. But the fact is, it's against the law to deny service to someone based on their race or religion. My name is John Quinones, and I'm with ABC News. What did you think of what you heard here?
I didn't hear anything racist.
He told her he wouldn't serve her.
Well, he can say he wouldn't serve you if you come in here barefoot without a shirt on.
But she wasn't barefoot or without a shirt on.
Well, she wasn't dressed right.
What do you mean?
If I'd run her place, I'd do the same thing.
You wouldn't let Muslims shop at your store?
I sure wouldn't.
We never expected customers to be so candid.
How do I know you don't have a bomb in there?
Watch what happens this time when, once again, our Muslim woman is denied service
That's about right.
and again leaves.
We reserve the right to not serve. That's right. Serve the honor. That's right. That's, I appreciate
He not only commends the man behind the counter for his discriminatory behavior, but he gives him the thumbs up, not once, but twice, as he leaves.
Can I talk to you, sir, for a second?
But when I approach,
Sir, we're with ABC News.
there is no thumbs up for me.
We staged a little experiment in there to see how people would
real nice for us, right? They started the video. Because they wanted to stimulate what? What do we think about people who are down there? Right? We typically have negative connotations when we hear that music, blah, blah, blah. So ABC and Disney is really good at stirring that kind of stuff up. Could this happen here? Yes. I have videos that has happened over at Pazaluna where they did some stuff about 5 years ago, right? There were 13 people who stood up. There were 6 who were negative, and there were 22 that did or said nothing. In this particular exercise, I want to talk a little bit about these 6 and how do we move forward with these 6. So the negative 6 we usually call bigots, we call them racists because they're disconnected and it's a behavior that they've learned. When you call someone a bigot or a racist or a fascist or a sexist, do they say, well, thank you? Do they get motivated for your cause? No. How many are there any good people in here? However you want to rate your standard, raise your hand if you are a good person. Oh, come on, I got more good people than that, right? What typically happens when we approach these negative 6s is, first of all, our silence is accepted by these negative 6s as acceptance. So when they interact with the world and we don't say anything, they think that we agree with them, so they act out even more. The other part about these negative 6s is that they operate disconnected from good people. I'll never forget this lesson that I learned in high school. My mother was cooking fish, and the kitchen was where we set our clothes out for school the next day. So there's the ironing board and all that kind of stuff. My mother cooked fish Thursday night. I had a problem Friday morning. What was my problem? I smelled like fish. And why did I smell like fish? Because my clothes were in close proximity to where fish was being cooked. Right? Now, I had some people who raised their hands. So I have a question for you good people. What do the people who are around you smell like? Do they smell good like you? I would encourage you to help combat these negative 6s. I love the negative 6s because I know what I'm dealing with. When I see a kid with swastikas and earrings and black outfits and chains, I know that I have a choice to either deal with that cat today or maybe tomorrow might be a better time. Love them. The other thing that I know about the negative 6s is that they've learned to be this way. And why was the child falling down? Because it worked before. So these negative 6s aren't doing this because they were born this way or they were negative. Or I have poor performers on my team. It's not because they were born this way. It's because that poor performance worked in the past. And how do I help change their behavior? They have to recognize that what? Not only does it not work, but there's a new or different way to do it. And so when we talk about these negative 6s, it's easy for us to cut them off. But when we cut them off, we actually cut a piece of ourselves off. I was watching the Discovery Channel, and they were following a pack of wolves. And they had them as puppies and then as teen wolves, and then they were getting ready for the big hunt. And so what happened was they all knew their roles. The lead, wolf jumped up on the back of the elk, and the elk kicked. What happened to that wolf? Broke his hip. Now, there are no hospitals in the forest. So now what is this wolf's new destiny? Death. And so he knows he's going to die. The pack knows he's going to die. So what does he decide to do for the betterment and the quality, the high quality of life for the pack? What does he decide to do? He leaves. And he goes off to die. But typically what happens with these negative 6s in our family, because you have an Uncle Joe, just like I have an Uncle Joe. Somebody, it might be a different name, but Uncle Joe is the guy where, you don't care where the kids are, you just want to know where he is. Right? Uncle Joe. But the problem is that we cut those negative 6s off, and they can't get better. What happens with those wolves? They go off to die. But humans are more creative than that. When we cut those people that are bad because we are so good, when we cut them off, they go find another pack of sick wolves. And then they start regenerating and giving birth to sicker wolves. And so what I would ask you to do is I'd ask you not to be a -6 and not to be a 22 who's silent, but to be a 13. However you call yourself ethnically, there are conversations that you will be privy to that I will never be privy to. There are ways that you can interact and have my back and be supportive to me that I will never know exist. At the same time, I will be able to do the same thing for you. I've gone past my time. My name is Andre Koen. Thank you so much for yours. Questions, comments, observations? Thank you. Enjoy your weekend. Do you want the evaluation?
That was good. I needed more of that.
A little bit more. I always overtime, so 3 more hours.
We thought it was 12.
Thank you. See you next time. Great day.
Zoom electronic survey tool. Survey Monkey or Zoomerang. Yeah, you can send it out to people who signed up.
I know, I don't get down there too much. Carter always is up here and. nothing else happens.
No. Very immediate.
I don't need them. So who wants these?
Put them on that. Thanks, Tricia.
No, those were spares. Thank you.
spares?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got that. Okay, thank you. Diana? Well, if it wasn't for that, I'd be crazy right now.
Those are Popeyes outside?
Yeah. I'll see you guys later.
Yeah, we watched it on COVID, you know, but it's funny what that means to other people. You know,
There's an old movie with my son. His name's Alan Arkin. And Alan Arkin plays a psych professor at Howard College. You know, one of these geniuses that won this huge Nobel decide they wanted just for fun to make something so they could learn stuff. But I do not know what I do not know. Isn't it fantastic? He takes like, is that, he goes, was the pool, well, the funny thing is, someone asked me, didn't you get that from Donald Trump? And the response is,
I'm not sure, I don't recall.
Can't find any. Do you need a handle stuff? No. Sure? Yeah. No. Change the code.
Is this your tangent too?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Sometimes I come to places that aren't historical communities. So bring on that.
Did it have a good battery for one?
Battery operated, you can put a microphone there, and you can plug your guitar into it, and it was half price.
Yeah, it's like $80. But they don't have a few. And they didn't have any, they only had a couple left.
But there's always, like, you know, next year's model comes out, and they did last year, we marked it down half, we do it about the same. So this year's model, comes down to a little bit bigger, not much. If they have some, they did replace it. You know, it's called ion.
Yeah, so isn't that cool? You see, I thought you knew, I thought you knew, and then to just have it outside or anywhere in the tent. And it's wood, my grass, we do this,
Yeah, because, sometimes I feel country places that aren't just well.
This is pretty slick here. Okay, so you then are not the speaker for the other session, just this time, or are you,
Good.
oh, okay.
Good. I don't know why they eliminated it. Is that pretty well limited? Is that, or do you like it to be limited? Yeah, well, actually, it's supposed to be this summer. Yeah, no, I think so. Fawn and I were both LED people.
They must be,
Yeah, she works for the city.
well, you know, cause you do that, yeah.
And I'm supposed to be doing it
Yeah,
for the
so
department.
I was on the friend wife committee, and he's now in charge of the department.
Okay. Yeah, so that was my excuse for coming. That was my time.
So next time if they, I mean, I don't really know how they line up with the work schedule, but you might see them from that time, probably.
And do you guys have roll call training? Like the
to, even at the individual fire stations, because I'd be excited to just go around to each station.
All you need to do is ride with me.
15 minutes.
Yeah, but all you need to do is take a day and ride with me. I go to headquarters and I go to each of the 5 stations and I just go and spend time in that school. Yeah, that's how you need to
That'd
do
be
it.
for everyone. Yeah, so, yeah.
You could do that.
I like to, yeah, because I like to, I'm trying to get to all the stations as well. To do, because, you know, there's, are we gonna do more citizens gathering?
But the sad thing is you miss out on Terry Donnelly who's retiring. Oh, that's super cool, yeah. But if you have a,
Normal people and make them into super people.
but we have a summer camp for kids. But if you know a kid, like, 16 or 18, that might be interested at all, it's a summer camp thing for kids, but you guys have a big hurry because this is a month.
But it's not, so if you only want to physically do
It's,
it, you could do it.
it's $25 only.
And it's no wait.
So if you know a kid in that 18-year-old age group, written in here too.
Because I won't remember them. I'm also a Boy Scout. Oh, okay. Well, there's a mixture.
I'm gonna do something, okay, so what do we got? I think I might have the dates straight. Also, last night I was at Big Brother's Big Sisters. Oh, 20 to 23rd, May 20 to 23rd.
That's the number to shoot for. How many women? 16 wide, because if you go too far below that, that's your loss. You know, I work with me. Yeah, that's my website.
Yeah, no, that's.
Yep, and, if you email me at Andre@Horizon. I was mostly a child, for one.
That's for the personality side.
Yeah.
Well, we think you have outside personality. And that's good.
On here, there's two options. Firefighters get hired after
Randy totally had it wrong. No, it's not at all. I read carefully in the paper and I read carefully the case, the information on that whole case. And all of it.
They took off and ran with it. Fox News and those folks took it and said, huh, reverse the
Yeah.
situation, there it is.
They wanted to just put 2 words on there.
And that's not what it was. It actually, the guy who screwed up. Text. That was the problem. It had nothing to do with the process, procedural issue. I'm a lawyer. Oh. Smart as Jesus. I should be a lawyer.
Thank you so very, very much.
Is that my stuff?
That's my stuff.
All right.
your motherly duties.
All right. See you later. Thank you.
Oh, no, I'm fine, I'm fine. All I need to do is close the door, is that correct?
Yes.